Coming up on the College Football Recruiting Show, Georgia building the brand of tight end U with a commitment from Jaden Riddell. School is out and the grades are in. Our Allen Trieu joins us with report cards for the Big Ten. Tennessee trying to add to its top 10 class with a big recruiting weekend in Knoxville. And have your calendars ready. The most important events to watch for this weekend. All this and more on the College Football Recruiting Show starting right now. Afternoon and welcome into the College Football Recruiting Show. I'm Grace Remington with Blair Angulo. Before we get started, go ahead and throw us a like on this video. Help us get to 100 likes today. Subscribe to the channel and send your questions to the chat so we can get to them by the end of the show. Blair, let's get into these top headlines of the day, starting with five-star California defensive lineman Aiden Breland has scheduled his first 4 official visits. He's headed to Texas A&M on June 2nd, Miami on June 9th, Georgia, June 16th, and Oregon on June 23rd. Blair, do any of these 4 programs have an edge heading into the summer?
Well, Grace, I think Aiden Breland has liked all of his unofficial visits. Georgia is obviously a heavyweight in recruiting right now, should never be discounted for a premier defensive prospect. You have to like Miami and what they're doing and the pool that they have in recruiting. Oregon is on a roll with Dan Lanning. He looks like a man on the mission. So those 3, I think, probably are the ones that stick out to me right now when it comes to five-star defensive lineman Aiden Breland.
The invite list for the Elite 11 finals continues to grow. Several of the best 2024 quarterbacks have received their tickets to the competition next month, including 5-star Michigan commit Jaden Davis and 4-star Florida commit DJ Lagway and uncommitted 4-star Elijah Brown. Blair, you'll be at the finals in June. Who are you most excited to see?
For me personally, among that group, I'd have to say Jaden Davis, the Michigan commit. Remember, Aaron Nolan beat him out for the invite outright at the regional that they both went to, and I think for the most part, Jaden Davis has maybe the most questions to answer in terms of his arm ability, the accuracy, the timing, all the things that make the Elite 11 a challenging environment. I think we've forgotten a little bit about Jaden Davis, so I'm excited to see what he has in store for us this summer.
2024 4-star tight end Jaden Riddell out of Peculiar, Missouri, committed to Georgia on Wednesday, choosing the Bulldogs over Alabama, Tennessee, Notre Dame, and Oregon. He is commitment number 16 for the national champs, who hold the top spot in the recruiting rankings. Blair, with this commitment, how do we feel about calling Georgia tight end U?
It turns out, Grace, that rumors of their demise were greatly exaggerated. Decommitment from Landon Thomas earlier in the year. They lost out on 5-star Deuce Robinson, the #1 prospect in the 2023 class, who ended up signing with USC. But it's safe to say that with Jaden Riddell on board and 2 of the top prospects that they landed in the 23 class, Georgia will be just fine at the tight end position.
So the rumors are just rumors. And we'll have more on Riddell to Georgia coming up in just a few minutes. Another 2024 quarterback off the board, 4-star Isaac Wilson, deciding last night to stay home and commit to Utah. He chose the Utes over finalist Oklahoma State, BYU, Arizona State, Arizona, and UCLA. Blair, what are the Utes getting in Wilson?
A really precise passer. He has great accuracy over the middle of the field, can hit the deep ball, has a really quick release, a bit more athletic than I think we give him credit for. And then on top of that, you give them a huge recruiting win in state to beat out a place like BYU, where your brother Zach Wilson was there and turned into the #2 overall selection. So, you know, this is a huge PR win for Utah, but obviously they get a 4-star quarterback that's going to be helping them win some football games in the future.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that PR win. In the last cycle, Utah landed 4 of the top 6 players in the state. Now by adding Wilson, they have the #2 player in the state of Utah this cycle. How has Kyle Whittingham been so successful in keeping these top prospects home?
This is a program now that I think is on the rise, not only nationally, but within the state. It wasn't too long ago that the top players from the Beehive State were leaving to go and play somewhere else. You know, you think of a player like Panay Sewell, who ended up at Oregon, became the number 7 overall draft pick. You think of a player like Noah Sewell a couple years ago, who was just drafted in the NFL this past year. Puka Nacua left initially to go to Washington. He was a top-rated receiver, an All-American Bowl participant. And for the longest time, it always felt like the premier players were headed elsewhere. Not anymore. This is a program that is now captured back-to-back Pac-12 championships. They've made it to the Rose Bowl game in back-to-back years. And now I think for the most part, recruits within the state feel like they don't have to leave or go far away from home to play big-time football. And that's obviously the key here with Isaac Wilson, who grew up in a Utah family. His father, Mike, played for the Utes in the early 90s along the defensive line. He told me that they had to switch out a lot of their red in their closet to the royal blue of BYU when his brother Zach Wilson played for the Cougars. But Utah's on the rebound, and now with a quarterback on board and a big name like Isaac Wilson, I would expect Utah and I would expect Kyle Whittingham to put the heat on a lot of the in-state prospects.
Utah jumping to 5th overall in those Pac-12 recruiting rankings with the commitment from 90-rated 4-star Isaac Wilson. For more recruiting news, it is time for Wiltfong Whip Around. Our director of recruiting, Steve Wiltfong, joining us now. Steve, let's go over some of these recent commitments, starting with Georgia landing 4-star tight end Jaden Riddell on Wednesday, adding another piece to their top-rated class. What is Georgia getting in the blue-chip tight end?
Yeah, one of the most prolific pass catchers at the position, turned 49 receptions into over 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns as a junior. He's athletic with terrific ball skills, can go up and get the football. He can run. He can separate. He's powerful. He's going to be a major weapon in this pro-style Georgia offense. He's the second tight end to commit this week as he joins Colton Heinrich, who's also a tough physical player at the point of attack that brings the versatility to that tight end room. So Georgia landing 2 of their top targets at the tight end position this week. They're rolling. Number 1 class in the country right now. I don't know if they'll look back.
Steve, Notre Dame added to their top 5 class with a commitment from 4-star edge Logan Thomas. How big is it for the Irish to dip into the state of Texas and land a top 24/7 talent?
Well, it's an exciting pickup for Marcus Freeman and his staff to go out and land one of the most athletic players in the country at the position. He can run. He's got 4.7 speed in the 40-yard dash. He can change direction. He's powerful. He's one of the most athletic edge players in America, coming from a proud program down there at Katy Paytow, helped them win a state championship as a sophomore. Notre Dame's putting together a nice defensive line class as he joins Cole Mullins from the Peach State and Bryce Young, whose father, Bryant Young, is the best Notre Dame player of all our lifetimes right now, with a high upside there, and Bryce Young. And then they're trending for Sean Sevillano on the 24/7 Sports Crystal Ball, native of Canada, playing down there in the Sunshine State right now. Sevillano had 22 tackles and 6 forced fumbles as a junior. So really nice defensive line class coming together for Notre Dame if they can get Sevillano into the fold after Logan Thomas.
In the latest top 247 update, Longview, Texas running back Taylor Tatum rose to the number 1 spot at his position, the 2024 talent being targeted by Oklahoma, Michigan, and USC. Steve, what's the latest with his process, and how are you feeling about his recruitment?
Yeah, so we previously reported an official visit to USC the first weekend of June, and then Oklahoma June 16th. He's also going to take an official visit to Michigan June 23rd, and I think those are the 3 programs that are trending in this recruitment right now. And if I had to handicap it, I would probably put USC and Oklahoma in best position to ultimately land him. This will be his 3rd time at USC. He loves the offense, loves Coach McDonald's track record there. And then with Oklahoma, him and his family are super tight with DeMarco Murray. He loves what Coach Venables is doing with the program, and he spoke highly of Jackson Arnold and thinks that's the franchise guy to help get the Sooners back to playing championship football under center. So I like those 2 programs for him. And then Michigan, obviously getting an official visit. He's aspiring physician, looking to play baseball in college too. So Michigan has a lot going for him in this recruitment as well.
Another running back that Michigan is targeting out of Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas is Micah Kaapana. You recently put in a crystal ball for him to end up with a maize and blue. What has you leaning that way, Steve?
Yeah, Blair, this is the guy that I think will be the next running back in Michigan's class. Right now, they have Jordan Marshall committed, dynamic player from the Midwest, probably the top player at the position in the Midwest. And then here, Kapana is a guy from Bishop Gorman that they absolutely covet. And I know you know a lot about this young man too, Blair, but he's an angle eraser on film, over 10 yards a carry. Over 1,000 yards on just 70 touches, can also catch the football. Just a very dynamic guy that sees the field well. And Michigan is extremely high on him, and they're bringing him in first in the month of June. They're going to bring in Darian Dupree after that, and then Taylor Tatum. But I like the way it's trending for Kapana. When you look at his top five, I think Michigan's the one to beat going into the officials.
Steve, you added another crystal ball yesterday favoring Ohio State for 2025 four-star Tavian St. Clair, an in-state quarterback out of Bellefontaine. The Buckeyes already have their 2024 signal caller, though, in Aaron Nolan. So why are you leaning Ohio State so early in St. Clair's process?
Well, I just think that this is the program that he grew up aspiring to play for, and now that he has the offer, I think that they're going to be tough to beat. Now, Tennessee jumped in very early and has made a big impression on Tavian St. Clair. I also think he's high on Penn State. And he's got a bunch of visits coming up this summer. But I think with Corey Dennis, Ohio State's quarterbacks coach, being there yesterday to watch him work out and offer, I think that was a big thing in his recruitment. And I think the Buckeyes are going to be the team to beat moving forward because of the track record under Ryan Day, the offense, and then just him being in state and him growing up. This is a school that he wanted to play for, and now he has the opportunity to do so. This is one of the hottest recruits in the country. We loved him at the Under Armour event in Ohio. He's a trend-up guy. We recently gave him his fourth star, and when we update our next 2025 rankings, I think that you'll see Andrew Ivins and his team continue to move him up after a fantastic sophomore year, and he continues to progress from there.
Steve, let's move over to the SEC, where Tennessee is primed for a big recruiting weekend as they host Tough Targets for their 865 live event. The headliner is five-star linebacker Sammy Brown, who obviously is maybe done chopping that big tree with his father and is ready to take his first official visit. Where do you see the Vols in the fight to land Sammy Brown?
Well, if I was handicapping the race, I have them in the 4th spot right now. I got Georgia, then Clemson, then Oklahoma, then Tennessee, then Ohio State going into the visits. But he's genuinely interested in all these programs. He's been to Knoxville a bunch. His mom's family's from the area. His last visit in the spring, he got a chance to spend a lot of time with Coach Brian Jean Mary and Coach Tim Banks, and of course Coach Heupel. He loves the trajectory of the program. He's talked about the great culture up there and says they're doing a good job, and he's excited to get back for what's going to be a super fun weekend in Knoxville.
So Sammy Brown is the only official visitor for Tennessee this weekend, but he's not the only five-star on campus. Edge Dylan Stewart making the trip from our nation's capital to Knoxville for the event. The Vols fighting schools like South Carolina, Georgia, Ohio State, and Miami for his signature. How did they fit into Stewart's recruitment, Steve, heading into the summer?
Well, I think we'll know more coming out of the visit this weekend. It's an opportunity for Tennessee to showcase the culture and how much fun they're having in Knoxville right now. That's what this weekend's going to be about. But look, we've talked about Dylan Stewart a lot on Whip Around and on this recruiting show. And we know that I feel good about Georgia's position in this recruitment. And then the schools that we said to keep an eye on for a long time is Miami and Oregon, and I think both those programs are trending up. We said he was going to lock in a visit to Miami for the second weekend of June. That's now on the books, and so Miami's a major trend-up team for Dylan Stewart. He's been high on Ohio State, but I just get the sense that when this recruitment continues to play out, I just feel like Georgia, Miami, South Carolina, Oregon, those are kind of the schools that I really continue to see rising with Dylan Stewart. And we'll see what happens with Tennessee this weekend. And then the other five-star coming on campus this weekend is Aiden Breland. You guys talked about him at the top of the show. Greg Biggins and I worked on getting confirmation that he would be at Tennessee this weekend. He's another one that Miami's in the middle of it for. Miami, we've said it a lot. I think they're going to sign the best defensive line class in the country. Dylan Stewart and Aiden Breland are two that they're in the thick of it for. But Tennessee going to take a swing at Aiden Breland and Dylan Stewart this weekend.
Those guys putting the 5-star in the 865 live event. Tennessee is not only going to welcome in those 5 stars, but a number of other top prospects as well. Steve, when you look at the Volunteers and where Josh Heupel might be trending, who are a few other names expected in Knoxville this weekend?
Well, as they look for a second straight top 10 class, Peyton Lewis is an obvious guy to point out right away. Top 247 running back out of Salem, Virginia. He's one of the fastest players in the country at the position, rushed for over 1,500 yards and 17 touchdowns. I think Tennessee is the heavy favorite coming into the weekend. Tennessee hosting 2 of their top running back targets this weekend, with Daniel Hill being the other. He's a 6'1", 220-pound standout out of the state of Mississippi, who's also state champion in the hurdlers, a ferocious runner that went for over 2,000 yards and 28 touchdowns as a junior. South Carolina may have some momentum there, but Tennessee trying to change that. And then a couple other guys that Tennessee's in great shape for coming into the weekend, maybe not on commit watch now, but commit watch as a whole as the process continues. Defensive back Boo Carter, who they've loved since having in camp last summer when he was a lockdown DB. Edwin Spillman's a major linebacker target for them in state. And then Ronan O'Connell's an offensive lineman in state I have forecasted to the Vols. And then 2 others that I think Tennessee's in great shape for. Cameron Fountain, an edge rusher from the Peach State. I'm willing to say I think Tennessee leads right now for him as they battle South Carolina. And then receiver Amari Jefferson. He's committed to Tennessee for baseball right now out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Baylor School has upcoming officials scheduled to Alabama and Georgia, but been to Tennessee this spring, high on the Vols. Things seem to be picking up there as well.
All right, lots of names to keep an eye on in Knoxville this weekend. Thanks, Steve, for joining us. Oh, he's doing the like dance. I can't believe I forgot to ask. Yeah, like this video for Steve, please. For all the best recruiting intel, purchase an annual VIP membership to 24/7 Sports. Get the news before anyone else. Read some great stories. You'll also get a subscription to Paramount Plus, so go ahead and do that right now. We continue handing out our recruiting report cards, and today we're going to the Big Ten. So let's take a look at the current Big Ten recruiting rankings right now. If we can do that, maybe. I'll just remind you guys again to subscribe to 24 Sports while that's up. But Michigan, Blair, atop the Big Ten with a total score above 250. There we go. Ohio State, second in the Big Ten, third nationally with 238 points. Penn State, Minnesota, and Iowa rounding out the top 5 classes with double-digit commits. Wisconsin, Purdue, Rutgers, Nebraska, and Northwestern. They're in the middle of the pack with about 7 to 8 commits each. And then Maryland, Indiana, Michigan State, and Illinois. Still with some work to do there, each with less than a handful of pledges. So let's get to those report cards now. Our national recruiting analyst, Allen Trieu, is here to help us break down all these classes. We'll start with the reigning Big Ten champ, Michigan, Allen, a group of 17 commits, highlighted by 5-star quarterback Jaden Davis. And Allen, we've been waiting for Michigan's recruiting to match that success on the field. Now that it's happening, what grade are you giving Jim Harbaugh in his 2024 class?
Yeah, let me preface this by saying that I'm kind of an easy grader. I'm the professor you wanted in college because I grade on an easy scale. But I think you have to give Michigan an A, right? You have the #1 class in the Big Ten, #1 class in the country. People, especially Michigan fans, were a little bit disappointed in last year's finish after they had a great season the year before. But after 2 good seasons in a row, 2 college football playoff appearances, this is the class that Wolverine fans have been waiting for. So you have the #1 class in the country, and we understand that that may not hold all the way until signing day, but even without that, it's a great class. You have a bell cow in quarterback Jaden Davis. You've put some really strong skill position players around him like Brady Priestcorn, Jordan Marshall. You've put some big offensive linemen in front of him, and I think the best thing about this class is that there's still a lot of potential there when you look at who they're bringing in for official visits come June.
Behind Michigan in the rankings right now, Allen, currently sitting 3rd in the country, is Ohio State. They have 13 commitments, including Mylan Graham, Jeremiah Smith, the #1 rated receiver in this class. The rivalry is alive and well. What grade would you give the Buckeyes so far in this cycle?
See, I think some Ohio State fans might not consider this an A until they're ahead of Michigan, and I understand the rivalry. But in my class, you don't look at your neighbor's paper. You just focus on what you're doing. And so solely on that, I will give Ohio State an A because it's a top 5 class, top 3 class. And once again, they're strong at the positions you expect them to be strong at. You mentioned that wide receiver class. It seems like you can just put it down every single year that several of the top receivers in the country are going to commit to Ohio State and sign with them. And then you have a quarterback like Aaron Nolan in the class to get them the football. The defensive class has to catch up a little bit, but just like I said with Michigan, when you look at who they have coming in for officials, guys like KJ Bolden, Sammy Brown, Dominic McKinley, those guys, I think they have a lot of potential still left on the defensive side of the ball. I think it's going to be interesting, too, that Ohio State and Michigan are going head-to-head for several guys, some of them from the state of Ohio, like Aaron Scott and Bryce West. And I think whoever wins out on those battles, or maybe a defensive end like Marquise Lightfoot, that could kind of flip around Ohio State and Michigan or keep the Wolverines ahead of the Buckeyes. So pay attention to a couple of those battles.
We'll go to Wisconsin now, where Luke Fickell is off and running. The Badgers sit 23rd in the overall rankings, 6th in the conference with 8 commits. And Fickell really tapping into the Midwest. He's got commitments from in the state, Illinois, Pennsylvania, but also expanding the footprint, going to Texas for a quarterback. So what grade are you giving his first full cycle with the Badgers?
Right now, I'm going to give them a B+. I think it's a good class. I think there's still potential here for it to get up to an A if June and into the fall goes really, really well. I think they've done a good job of, like you said, attacking different states that they had connections to. I think when you look at it, it's still a classic Wisconsin class. This looks like the type of Wisconsin class that this program's been built on. When you look at 2 talented tight ends, you look at big offensive linemen, one from in the state like Derek Jensen, you look at guys in the front 7 like Thomas Heiberger, who fit the mold of what Wisconsin has recruited at outside linebacker. So I think they've done a good job of coming in and breathing some new life into Badger recruiting, but also not straying too far away from the formula that's made Wisconsin into a perennial Big Ten West contender.
Staying in the Big Ten West, we have Northwestern. Allen, we know the obstacles that Coach Fat Fitzgerald and that whole staff they have when it comes to recruiting, and they're sitting 10th right now in the Big Ten. What color Sharpie is Professor Allen Trieu breaking out for the Northwestern Wildcats?
I'm going to give them a B-, and I know Northwestern is probably not accustomed to too many B's on those report cards, but I think it's a good class so far, and I think that they've gone up to a B- in the last few weeks here. They had an early official visit weekend in May, came out of that with several commits, including Peyton Stewart, who was a big grab at offensive tackle. They beat Wisconsin and several other programs for Dylan Johnson, landed several recruits out of the state of Michigan. That's been kind to them. And once again, I think this is a class that still has upside in it. They've really targeted quarterbacks out of high school. They've had to go into the portal several times to land themselves a quarterback. They would love to get one out of high school and develop one. Aiden Glover is a guy that I think ultimately could end up in this class. Several other big official visitors coming in June. So I think Pat Fitzgerald and his crew are trending towards a really, really good class here.
Before we go a little bit more in depth on the rest of these schools, let's take a look at your complete report card here, Allen. I see 5 A's, 5 B's, and 4 C's. So I think you're right. You're pretty good, a pretty fair grader here. All that kind of checks out. But we have 10 more classes to run through. So let's start with the teams sitting 3rd and 4th in the Big Ten. Penn State, 7th nationally with 14 commits. Minnesota, 13th nationally with 14 commits. And Allen, you're giving them both A's. Why is that?
Well, first with Penn State, when you have the numbers, again, you don't look at the fact that Ohio State and Michigan are ahead of them. Penn State is the number 7 class in the country, so a top 10 class. They are continuing what they did last year when they were really strong on the offensive line. I think that's an important position for them. They're doing that again in this class. They were able to go into Wisconsin, a state that they haven't recruited a ton over the years, maybe a little bit here and there, and got 3 commits out of the state of Wisconsin. A couple of big gets from inside the state as well. So I think with them positioned as a top 10 class, have to give Penn State an A. Minnesota exceeding expectations. Several schools have come in and tried to poach some of their top in-state recruits. It's a really good year in the state of Minnesota. They've been able to keep a couple of those guys at home. So when you see Minnesota up there at number 4 and number 10 in the Big Ten West, it's hard to give them anything but an A, because I think a couple of those in-state guys may have been able to hold their recruitment out for longer, and Minnesota got them in the class early.
Iowa and Purdue are up next, 2 programs with different recruiting staffs and different approaches to how they go about recruiting. Iowa with an A, and you've got Purdue with a B+. What do you think of both of these programs so far in the 2024 cycle?
Yeah, Iowa's one where I think their ranking may even be a little bit deceiving, because if you look at where 24/7's in-house rankings has some of their recruits, we're a little bit higher on some of their commits than others. We really like their linebacker class led by Derek Weisskopf and Cam Buffington. And so I think Iowa has a really, really strong class right now. And they have several guys coming in June who I think can add to this class and raise that further. I think they will give Minnesota a good run for that top class in the Big Ten West. And then Purdue, I thought they had maybe the sneaky best class, kind of the sleeper class of the Big Ten a year ago. They're continuing that into this year. They don't do it with a ton of flash right now. They're not looking for, they even closed off spring practice. I think that kind of tells you about Ryan Walters' mindset right now. But they've done really well in the states of Tennessee and Texas, and they have their quarterback in the class in Marcos Davila. So I think that's big to have that foundation of having your signal caller in the class.
We'll go to the two East Coast programs now, Rutgers and Maryland. Greg Schiano still in that rebuilding process with the Scarlet Knights. His 2024 class just inside the top 30 at number 29, 8 commits there. And then Maryland trying to build off an 8-win season. The Terps sitting outside the top 50 with 4 commits. Allen, you're giving Rutgers a B and Maryland a C-. Why those two grades?
Yeah, so first with Rutgers being inside the top 30 right now, I think that's a really good class. And they've been Jersey heavy in other years, which they still are. They've been East Coast heavy, but they've been able to come over further into the Midwest and have some good wins in this class. Their top commit, Gabriel Winovich, is just a testing monster who has put up some huge numbers at combines and other events the last 2 years. Versatile athlete who I think can do a lot for them. Maryland, I think that when you give some of these lower grades, the C-, those teams I consider, they only have a couple of commits in the class, but some of those programs still have a lot of ability to build the class. We're not even into June yet. A lot of them have visits still coming up. Maryland has some really, really highly ranked visitors coming in. And so that's why I was maybe a little bit easier on the bottom of the Big Ten, because understanding right now it's May and a lot of these classes will be filled out and given different grades by the end of June and July. And Maryland is one where you look at their official visit list coming in, there's some really, really highly regarded players coming to campus.
Matt Rule has the Huskers recruiting pretty well so far in his first true recruiting class. They are 30th nationally, and Indiana, meanwhile, is outside the top 50. You gave these a B- for the Huskers and a C for the Hoosiers. How do you feel about these two schools heading into the summer, Allen?
Well, I think Nebraska last year finished with the top class in the Big Ten West, and so this one's not there right now. You'd like to get it there, and that's why they were not graded higher. But the thing I like about both of these classes is I like the quarterbacks in both groups. Nebraska was just able to flip in-state quarterback Daniel Kalen from Missouri, very talented, smart player who's had a good career at Bellevue West. And then Indiana picked up Tim Carpenter, who I loved at the recent spring events, a big athletic prospect. And so I think that's where the fans of both of those schools can hang their hats right now, is that they both have talented quarterbacks to help lead this class. And I think other commits will follow, particularly on the offensive side of the ball.
And we'll finish up with the bottom two classes in the conference, Michigan State and Illinois. 2 C grades here from you, Allen, for programs right next to each other in the national rankings. The Spartans 65th, the Illini 66th. Why do you think these programs have struggled so far in the 2024 cycle?
Well, I think that it could be a little bit philosophical. I think they both also have larger official visit lists in June. Michigan State had a couple of defections out of the class, so both of them only sit right now with 3 commits. But when you look at those official visit lists coming in, both have a chance to do really well in June. Michigan State has some heavy hitters coming to campus. 4-star linebacker Kamar Mathudi. They'll have a chance to get 4-star wide receiver Nick Marsh back on campus. He was once committed to them. They get him back in the class. That immediately boosts that grade way up. Same thing with Illinois, where you look at how many in-state visitors they have coming in. Guys like Darian Dupree, guys like Luke Williams, highly ranked guys who are still considering Illinois. I think they've done a good job of building relationships with those kids, getting them on campus for unofficial visits, and now they have them coming in for officials. And so they just haven't been able to close some of those guys out early. But both of those programs, I think when you look at their official visit list for June, there's reason for optimism.
All right, great stuff, Allen. Thanks for joining us. And for more updates from the recruiting trail, listen to the Football Recruiting Podcast with Cooper Patagna and Andrew Ivins. New episodes dropping every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. You can download or listen wherever you get your pods. We're going to keep the Big Ten theme going here with Minnesota. They have a chance to close 2024 with its highest ranked class ever. So let's bring in the expert, Ryan Burns, publisher of Gopher Illustrated. to break down this class. Ryan, typically we see the Blue Bloods toward the top of the recruiting rankings, but Minnesota breaking the mold here. Its 24 class is 12th nationally with 14 commits. You just heard Allen Trieu in our last segment giving them a high grade. So why do you think the Gophers have had so much success early on?
Well, I certainly think winning helps, and that's where you look at what Minnesota's done the last few seasons. They've won 9 or more games in their last 3 full seasons, but I also think they've done a really good job of identifying quality talent early and then getting on it. That's where you look at some of their top commits in the class so far, like Coy Parrish, a 4-star here on 24/7 Sports from northern Minnesota. They're able to beat out legitimately Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa. Why? Well, I think being the first Power 5 offer at a kid like that helps. Same thing goes with a kid like Riley Sunrum, best player in North Dakota, beating out Miami of Florida, Kansas State, or even going into Virginia and getting Zahir Rainier. Someone with 30-plus offers. Why does he choose the University of Minnesota? Well, it helps to have Antoine Winfield Jr., someone that he idolizes, but Minnesota was also on him very early on. So I think that Fleck and staff have done a really good job of, number one, identifying the talent and then being able to get that talent onto campus. And that's where, with PJ Fleck, he's a very polarizing head coach. The way I like to describe him after having numerous interactions with him over the last 6 years, he's not a walking Red Bull. He's 5 walking Red Bulls all the time, whether the camera's on or off. And that's where these kids want to play for that type of energy. If he's not for you, you're going to know within the first 5 minutes of it. But these kids love the energy, and Minnesota's done a good job of identifying talent early on.
Ryan, there was so much buzz, right, about PJ Fleck and a lot of the momentum that he built early on when he got to Minnesota. We all, I think, remember the row the boat movement, and he's translated that into wins on the field. Now, do you think their success over the last couple of seasons has helped them become that program that can compete with some elite Power 5 programs for recruits?
I do. Like I mentioned earlier, they've won 9 or more games in each of the last 3 full seasons. In 2019, they had a magical run of 11 wins, going to the Outback Bowl and beating Auburn. They've won 9 games the last 2 full seasons here in 2021 and 2022. And then I think if you translate that to the NFL draft as well, Minnesota's had the most amount of draft picks in the last 4 years since 1988 to 1991. That's the most in my lifetime as someone who was born in 1992. So if you combine the on-field success with what they've done with putting talent into the NFL, I think that's going to catch a lot of recruits' attention, not only just around the Midwest here, but also around the country. And if you combine that with PJ Fleck's energy, like I said, you're either going to know within 5 minutes of talking to him whether you love him and you want to play for him, or if that's just not going to be for you. But combining all 3 of those is Fleck and his staff's just energy, I would say, on the recruiting trail to go with what they've shown in terms of on-field results and in the NFL draft. I think that's a recipe for success.
Now, Ryan, to stay inside the top 15 or even just the top 25, obviously the staff needs enough pieces left on the board to continue adding to the class. So who are a few names that PJ Fleck's crew has their eyes on that could help them stay in the top 25?
Well, if they're going to stay in the top 25, they're going to have to land 3 guys, and all of them are 4 stars, and all of them are in the trenches. That's where the Big Ten West, to me, is won or lost, is up front. So we have to start with one of the top kids in the state of Minnesota by the name of Emerson Mandel, someone that is a composite 4-star, someone that has been one of the hottest offensive linemen in the Midwest, picking up offers this spring from Wisconsin, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, among many others. I think he's got an offer from essentially everyone in the Big Ten West, someone that is a great track thrower as well, just threw over 50 feet the other day. And Minnesota's done a great job of getting him on campus. I think he's been on campus already 5 different times on unofficial visits. He'll be back here in a couple weeks for his official visit. But if you're going to continue to stay in the top 25, Emerson Mandel is someone you're going to have. Then we look to the state of Wisconsin with an offensive lineman, a 4-star by the name of Nathan Roy, someone that Minnesota's battling both UCLA and Michigan State for. He just took an official visit to UCLA a couple of weeks ago. He'll be at Minnesota and Michigan State here in June, someone that is in the top 200 via the composite. And then finally, I think you have to look on the defensive line, Wyatt Gilmore, someone we have as a 4-star here on 24/7 Sports from Rogers High School here in the state of Minnesota, a really good pass rusher, someone that is 6'4", can really bend, has a lot of that twitch, and can really turn the corner. So how do you win in the Big Ten West? Well, you better be able to protect your quarterback and get after the quarterback. So if Minnesota's going to have staying power, they're going to have to land all 3 of those guys. But the beauty is you're going to have all of them back on campus here in the next 3 weeks.
PJ Fleck has the Gophers pacing for their best class of all time, and it sounds like, Ryan, he's single-handedly keeping the energy drink business, full go, right? He's keeping it humming at all costs right now. Fast forward though to the end of the cycle, if they fail to finish inside the top 25, what obstacles do you see them facing that would prevent them from accomplishing that goal?
Well, I would say two things. Number one, if you look at Minnesota's proximity to even the top 24/7 that we just put out and released here a few days ago, and you look at Minnesota's location to where a majority of these prospects are across the country, I would argue that if you draw a 500-mile radius around Minneapolis, there is the fewest amount of it from any Power 5 school within that radius. It just, the reality is what it is, where the Southeast and the South, the Californias, the Texases, the Georgias, and the Floridas of the world, they're not really anywhere near close to where Minnesota is. And that's where the state of Minnesota is getting better with producing high-end talent. But there, as we currently sit here, there isn't a single player within that top 24/7 that we have ranked there. And then NIL. NIL has come a long way here at the University of Minnesota with Dickeytown athletes. But the way that it's going to work here is I don't see it really hitting the recruiting trail too much. Minnesota is making sure that NIL is going to their top players, and I don't see it being used too much on the recruiting trail. So if you don't have a ton of NIL to offer to 4 and 5 stars, and then you're also not really within a 500-mile radius of where all that talent is, that's where the challenge lies for whoever the Minnesota head coach is, and PJ Fleck knows that.
All right, so we've discussed the current success, the prospects left on the board, and potential obstacles. Ryan, how likely is it that the Gophers finish this cycle inside the top 25?
Well, if they're going to stay there, I mentioned, and I just looked here before coming on, if you look at that 20 to 25 range when it comes to being December or February, you have to be around an 88 average. Now, Minnesota's hovering around that 87 average, and if they land some of these 4 stars like Wyatt Gilmore, Emerson Mandel, Nathan Roy, or some other top prospects like Samuel Madu, I think they're going to have a great shot. Now, that's a lot of Plan A guys that you're going to have to land, but the amount of success that Minnesota's had here early on, once kids can get to Minnesota and see that as we are currently sitting here today, it is 82 degrees. It is not a barren wasteland that is cold and snowy year-round. That's where June official visits have been gigantic for the University of Minnesota. But if they're going to remain in the top 25, they got to continue to land as many Plan A targets as possible. And it's not a coincidence that those Plan A guys are also the most highly rated guys that they have left on their board.
All right, it'll be really fun to watch PJ Fleck and that 5 Red Bull energy of his. Thanks, Ryan. Really smart insight there. For more news and analysis on Minnesota from Ryan Burns and the entire squad, make sure to check out gophersillustrated.com. All right, people, get out your phone, your fancy planner, whatever you use these days. It is time to mark those calendars. Here is the most important events coming up in the world of recruiting. The Steve Clarkson quarterback retreat takes place this weekend in LA. The 2-day event is expected to welcome some of the top high school quarterbacks, including 2024 Alabama commit Julian Sayin, 2026 quarterback Julian Lewis, among others. Blair, how beneficial is this event to a prospect's development?
This event is really important in terms of understanding what is expected out of you once you become a college quarterback. You see some of the players that make it out there. Patrick Mahomes was there a few years ago. Tua Tagovailoa when he was at Alabama. We had Bryce Young as a counselor a couple years ago. I mean, these are the stars of college that go back to LA and start to interact with some high schoolers. So from that standpoint, I think it's huge. They don't do a lot of throwing. It's more of a retreat. It's more of a kind of a getaway to really interact and to network with other quarterbacks. But it's key. It's always about continuing to add things to your repertoire. And Julian Sayin will be one of those headliners that can, maybe in a couple years when he's the Alabama quarterback, can return and obviously give that back to the high schoolers in a couple years.
Yep, networking, very important in this biz. 2024 3-star wide receiver Logan Saldate will announce his decision on Monday at 5 o'clock Eastern, right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. The California native will choose between Arizona, Cal, Oklahoma State, Oregon State, and Washington. Blair, where are you leaning heading into this announcement?
It sounds like the Oregon State Beavers have grasped a lot of the momentum for Logan Saldate in recent weeks. A really dynamic pass catcher. You see him there running track. Has really good straight line speed. I love his hand-eye coordination and just how physical he is over the middle of the field. And that would be a tailor-made offensive weapon in Jonathan Smith's offense, where Oregon State is now battling some big-time programs for prospects like Logan Saldate. So look out for the Beavers on Monday as they try to close in on another highly rated prospect out west.
And the Elite 11 continues to send out invites as they build for the roster for the final in June. As we mentioned earlier, 6 more quarterbacks have been added over the last few days, and more expected to join the group in LA in just a few weeks. Blair, you attend a lot of these events, but with this one's a little bit more special. All the top quarterbacks in one place. How exciting is it to cover the Elite 11 finals?
It's really exciting, and it's really fun to see these guys go throw to throw, right? They go after each other in the same drill, and you're able to see and compare them in real time. We heard Andrew Ivins, the director of scouting at 24/7 Sports, talk about this earlier in the week on Monday's show, that they didn't really make a lot of moves among the quarterbacks in this 2024 class because they want to see these guys go compete against each other in that Elite 11 finals setting. So it's huge because we get to see them compete, and then we get to see them in every drill right next to each other. You can see maybe someone throw the ball a little bit tighter, put a little bit more spin on a ball. You can see who has maybe the more arm strength over that same group. So it's a huge event in terms of the quarterback evaluations, and we get to really differentiate them when we're trying to figure out who the number 1 guy is, who the number 10 guy is, who might even be the number 15 guy. I think it's a huge part of the evaluation process.
All right, and here's the recap, folks. The Steve Clarkson quarterback retreat starts on Saturday. We got a commitment for wide receiver Logan Saldate on Memorial Day, 5 o'clock Eastern on 24/7 Sports YouTube channel, your home for commitments. And the Elite 11 finals in June. You can stay locked into 247sports.com for updates on those throughout the weekend. And that's going to do it for us on this episode of the College Football Recruiting Show. Until we see you again, keep it locked in on the website and this YouTube channel so you don't miss a thing. Thank you for watching. For Blair, I'm Grace. Have a great Memorial Day weekend.